The microphone hit the floor. Robin Williams froze. 3,000 people held their breath. The laughter died. The energy shifted. And in that silence, something broke open that had been locked away for 30 years. A blind man in the front row had just said 5 words that would change everything. "I can see your voice." Robin stood there, motionless, his hands still extended from where he'd been gesturing mid-joke. His eyes glistened under the stage lights. The audience didn't know whether to clap, to stay silent, or to look away. They had come for comedy. They had come to escape. But what they were about to witness was something far more profound. The moment a man who had spent his entire life making others laugh finally allowed himself to be seen. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't part of the show. This was real. And it was about to unravel everything. If you want to understand what happened next, and why this moment would haunt Robin Williams for the rest of his life, stay with me. Because what you're about to hear goes deeper than comedy, deeper than performance, deeper than anything Robin had ever shared on stage before. It was 1994. The Orpheum Theater in San Francisco. Robin Williams was at the peak of his career. Mrs. Doubtfire had just broken box office records. Aladdin's genie had become iconic. He was the king of comedy, the master of improvisation, the man who could make a room of strangers feel like family within seconds. But tonight was different. The show had started like any other. Robin exploded onto the stage with his trademark energy, voices flying, characters emerging, the audience roaring with laughter. He was a hurricane of brilliance, shifting from accents to impressions to philosophical observations without missing a beat. But beneath the laughter, Robin was carrying something heavy. Something he hadn't told anyone about. 2 weeks earlier, he'd received a letter. It was from a woman named Margaret, a teacher from Ohio. She wrote about her son, Daniel, who had been born blind. Daniel was 14 years old and had never seen a sunset, never seen his mother's face, never seen the world that everyone else took for granted. But Daniel loved Robin Williams. Margaret explained that her son would listen to Robin's movies, his stand-up specials, his interviews, over and over again. He would memorize the cadence of Robin's voice, the rhythm of his jokes, the warmth in his tone. Daniel didn't need to see Robin to understand him. He could feel him through sound alone. The letter ended with a simple request. "If you ever perform near us, could Daniel meet you? Just for a moment. It would mean the world to him." Robin had read that letter backstage before tonight's show. He'd folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. And now, 40 minutes into his set, he could feel its weight pressing against his chest. He was in the middle of a bit about traffic in Los Angeles, voices flying, the audience howling, when he saw them. Front row. A woman and a teenage boy. The boy's head was tilted slightly upward, his eyes unfocused, his hands resting gently on his lap. Margaret and Daniel. Robin stopped mid-sentence. The audience thought it was part of the act. They waited for the punchline. But Robin wasn't performing anymore. He was staring at the boy, his mind racing back to the letter, to the words Margaret had written, to the weight of what it meant to be heard but never seen. And then Daniel smiled. Not at Robin. Not at the stage. Just smiled. Because he could hear the silence, and he knew something was shifting. Robin stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. He walked to the edge of the stage, crouched down, and looked directly at Daniel, even though Daniel couldn't see him. "Hey," Robin said softly, his voice stripped of all performance, all character. Just Robin. "Are you Daniel?" The boy's face lit up. "Yes," he whispered. "Your mom wrote me a letter," Robin continued, his voice cracking slightly. "She told me you listened to my voice." Daniel nodded, his smile growing wider. "I know every word of Aladdin. I know all your characters. I know when you're sad even when you're trying to be funny." The audience was dead silent now. This wasn't comedy. This was something else. Robin's eyes filled with tears. You can hear when I'm sad?" "Yes," Daniel said simply. "Because your voice changes. Just a little. But I can hear it." Robin Williams, the man who had hidden behind 1,000 voices, had just been seen by someone who couldn't see at all. Robin sat down on the edge of the stage, his legs dangling, his face inches from Daniel's. The theater, the audience, the show, all of it faded away. There was only this boy, this moment, this truth. "What do you hear right now?" Robin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel tilted his head, listening carefully. "I hear someone who's tired. Someone who's been running for a long time. Someone who needs to stop." The words hit Robin like a punch to the chest. He closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his cheek. The audience watched in stunned silence as one of the greatest performers in the world sat there, completely undone by a blind teenager. "You're right," Robin finally said, his voice shaking. "I am tired. I've been running my whole life. Running from silence. Running from stillness. Running from myself." Margaret, Daniel's mother, reached out and gently touched Robin's hand. "You don't have to run here," she said softly. And that's when it happened. Robin Williams, the man who had filled every silence with noise, who had turned pain into punchlines, who had made the world laugh to keep from crying, finally let himself be silent. He sat there on that stage, holding Daniel's hand, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time in 30 years, he wasn't performing. He was just being. Being seen. Being heard. Being human. The audience didn't move. Some were crying. Others sat with their hands over their hearts. Because they weren't watching a show anymore. They were witnessing something sacred. The moment a man who had given everything to make others happy finally allowed himself to be sad. Subscribe and leave a comment, because what happens next will show you why this moment became the most important of Robin's entire life. After several minutes, Robin slowly stood up. He wiped his eyes, took a deep breath, and turned back to face the audience. His face was raw, vulnerable, completely exposed. No mask. No character. Just Robin. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice steady but quiet. "I've been performing since I was a kid. I learned early that if I could make people laugh, they would love me. If I could be funny, I would be safe. If I could disappear into characters, I would never have to face who I really was." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces watching him. "But tonight this young man, who has never seen me, just saw me more clearly than I've ever seen myself." Daniel's words echoed in Robin's mind. "I can hear when you're sad even when you're trying to be funny." "My whole career," Robin continued, "I've been trying to outrun sadness. I thought if I was fast enough, loud enough, funny enough, it would never catch me. But Daniel just taught me something. He taught me that being heard is more important than being loud. That being real is more powerful than being perfect. That sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop running." The silence in the theater was profound. People weren't just listening. They were absorbing. They were feeling every word in their bones. Robin turned back to Daniel. "You said you can see my voice. Can I tell you what I see when I hear yours?" Daniel nodded eagerly. "I see courage," Robin said. "I see someone who navigates a world designed for sight, using only sound and touch and intuition. I see someone who doesn't need eyes to understand people. Who doesn't need light to see truth. You see me better than anyone with perfect vision ever has." Margaret was crying now, holding her son's hand. Daniel's face was radiant. "You've been my hero since I was little," Daniel said softly. "But I think maybe you needed a hero tonight too." Robin Williams dropped to his knees. Right there on stage. And he wept. Not the theatrical crying of a performance. Not the controlled emotion of a scripted moment. Real, deep, guttural sobs of a man who had finally been given permission to feel everything he'd been holding back. The audience rose to their feet. Not applauding. Not cheering. Just standing. Bearing witness. Holding space for this moment of complete human vulnerability. When Robin finally stood, his face was transformed. The weight he'd been carrying, the exhaustion Daniel had heard in his voice, seemed lighter somehow. Not gone, but acknowledged. Not healed, but seen. He walked back to the microphone, picked it up from where it had fallen, and looked out at the crowd. "This wasn't the show I planned to give you tonight," he said with a small, genuine smile. "But I think it might be the most honest performance of my life." The audience laughed, a warm, gentle sound. Not because something was funny, but because something was true. "I spend my life making people laugh," Robin continued. "And I love it. I really do. But tonight you all just gave me something I didn't know I needed. You let me be sad. You let me be real. You let me be human. And that's a gift I'll never forget." He turned to Daniel one more time. "Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me. You have a superpower, kid. You see what's invisible." Daniel smiled. "So do you, Mr. Williams. You make people feel things they didn't know they could feel. That's your superpower." This was the moment that changed everything. Not just for that night, but for how Robin Williams understood his own life. After the show, Robin spent 2 hours backstage with Daniel and Margaret. They talked about movies, about comedy, about life. Daniel shared how he experienced the world through sound, how he could tell when someone was lying by the tension in their voice, how he could feel emotion in the way people breathed. Robin was fascinated, humbled, changed. Before they left, Daniel handed Robin a small cassette tape. "I made this for you," he said. "It's all the sounds that make me happy. Ocean waves. My mom's laugh. Rain on windows. And some of your voices. Because they make me happy too." Robin held that tape like it was the most precious thing in the world. "I'll listen to it," he promised. "When I'm running too fast, when I'm hiding too much, I'll listen to this and remember tonight." Margaret hugged him. "You gave my son so much joy over the years. Thank you for letting him give you something back." As they walked away, Robin stood alone in the empty theater. The stage lights were off. The audience was gone. It was just him and the silence. And for the first time in his life, the silence didn't scare him. He sat down on the stage in the exact spot where he'd sat with Daniel, and he listened to the tape. Ocean waves. Margaret's laugh. Rain on windows. And then, his own voice, performing Genie from Aladdin. But listening to it now, after tonight, he heard what Daniel heard. He heard the sadness underneath the performance. The loneliness beneath the laughter. The man running from himself at 1,000 miles per hour. Robin Williams cried again. But this time, they were different tears. Not tears of breakdown, but tears of breakthrough. Not tears of pain, but tears of recognition. He finally understood what Daniel had given him: permission to be imperfect. Permission to be seen. Permission to stop. Share this video and subscribe, because Robin's story doesn't end here. What he learned that night would stay with him, guiding him through the hardest moments still to come. In the years that followed, Robin kept that cassette tape with him everywhere. On movie sets. During interviews. In his dressing room before performances. Whenever the pressure became too much, whenever the running felt too fast, he would listen to it and remember the boy who could see his voice. He talked about that night often in private, though he rarely shared it publicly. It was too sacred, too personal. But those close to him noticed a shift. Robin became more willing to pause, to breathe, to let silence exist without filling it with noise. He started doing smaller shows, more intimate venues where he could connect with audiences the way he connected with Daniel. He began supporting organizations for blind children, using his platform to bring attention to their stories, their experiences, their unique way of experiencing the world. And in his darkest moments, when depression would creep in, when the weight of expectation felt unbearable, he would close his eyes and hear Daniel's voice. "I can see your voice. And right now, I hear someone who needs to stop running." The theater still stands today. The Orpheum in San Francisco. And sometimes, late at night, the staff swears they can feel something in that space. Not a ghost. Not a haunting. But a presence. The echo of a moment when one of the greatest performers in history finally stopped performing and just was. Daniel went on to become a sound engineer, working in radio and helping create audio experiences for blind communities worldwide. He never forgot that night, and he carried Robin's words with him. "You see what's invisible." Margaret framed the letter she'd written to Robin, the one that started it all. She hung it in Daniel's room with a note. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for what we need." And Robin Williams, the man who spent his life giving joy to millions, learned that the greatest gift he could give himself was permission to be human. The legacy of that night isn't captured in video or photographs. It lives in the hearts of everyone who was there, who witnessed a comedian become a human being, who watched invincibility crack open to reveal vulnerability, who understood that sometimes the strongest act is to stop fighting and just feel. Robin once said in an interview years later, "That night, a blind kid taught me that being seen isn't about being visible. It's about being real." And in those 5 words from Daniel, "I can see your voice," Robin Williams finally learned to see himself. That night in 1994 wasn't just a show. It was the moment a man who made the world laugh gave himself permission to cry. And that's the greatest performance he ever gave, the one where he stopped performing and just let himself be human.